So you got all of it. My big project is.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Did everyone get a handout? I had them. They were hiding on the corner of the table. Anyone need one? Ever got a handout? I'll leave these up here so anyone who walks in late has to walk to the front. Okay. You're so I guess this door is locked. The other door is unlocked. Handouts are over here, guys. Maybe we could pass a couple handouts down. Hey, Tori, do you want to grab a couple handouts to take?
Down there. I can put it next to you.
Over here. Here, guys. I can move this too if need be.
There's a great spot right here. Front and center.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Everyone has a handout, hopefully. If not, I think there's a couple more by Linda back here. Sorry, go ahead. Please join us. There's a lot of noise out there. All right, pass the handouts around if anyone needs one. We are in week number 10 of The Reason for God. We've been going through Pastor Tim Keller's book, The Reason for God. We are in week number 10. This week, when I read this chapter, well, let's just review it real quick so we remember. We had started, the first part of this study we had started earlier this fall, and we were looking at objections that people would have against the Christian faith. So the first half of this book was kind of objections that people have against Christianity and how we would answer those. Okay? Last week we started looking at the second half of the book. In the second half of the book, the burden of proof, so to speak, shifts to us. So now we're starting to look at we called them clues. Clues of God, or that's the one that we looked at last week, or reasons for faith. So what are reasons that we would give people to consider God or to consider faith? So that's what the second half of the book is looking at, and we're going to continue with that today. We're going to talk about the problem of sin and how the problem of sin could be a reason for a skeptic to consider faith, okay? when I read this chapter, two things kind of happened for me. First off, when we talked about when I read about this problem of sin, I myself was convicted because it was a chapter that talked about disordered loves and how we put other things above God. And then at the end of the chapter, I had to remind myself, oh yeah, we're looking at this in the context of a skeptic. And so I think that as we go through today, I think two things are going to happen. We're going to realize that this is something that we all struggle with in our lives as Christians. But then we're also going to look at this problem of sin as an opportunity to witness to skeptics. And so that would be my goal at the end today, that we can answer someone who's wrestling with this problem of sin. Let's start on the top of your handout there. There's a quote. This was a quote from the beginning of the chapter. Can we doubt that presently our race will more than realize our boldest imaginations, that it will achieve unity and peace, and that our children will live in a world made more splendid and lovely than any palace or garden that we know, going on from strength to strength in an ever-widening circle of achievement? What man has done, the little triumphs of his present state, form but the prelude to the things that man has yet to do. This is a quote from H.G. Wells, who was anyone heard of H.G. Wells? Famous author, wrote War of the Worlds, was maybe one of his most popular titles, but famous sci-fi author, lived born, I think he was born towards the end of the 1800s, lived late in the 1800s, well into the first part of the 1900s. This quote was from 1937, which is interesting. Let's look at that first question there. Is there truth in what he said in that quote that I just read? And can you give an example? He's kind of making a prediction there. Yeah.
Obviously, we can think of a lot of achievements that have been made in the world, especially since 1937. I mean, technology, our phones, our computers, I mean, all of that stuff. So that's true.
Yeah, good. So that was like iPhones was an example that I was thinking of. Like I think we would say, yeah, I mean, an amazing invention that was made by humans. Other examples, truth in what he said, yeah.
I'm actually currently reading some Ray Bradbury right now, and he's talking about 1997 and 2005, and we're already living on Mars with an atmosphere and trees and everything, and yeah, so it's the Chronicles of Mars is the series, and it's just all these interesting stories, and every time it brings up the year, I'm like, ooh, we're 20 years ahead of that, and we're nowhere near some of
so sometimes we're behind though, yeah. So we can say there's been some great advancements, but maybe not as far as we wanted, yeah.
I strongly disagree, because he said this period was written, this is after Hitler has come to power in Europe, and this is nothing more than a secular humanist point of view with socialism, that if we just organize society correctly, we'll all do well and be happy. It is,
So we're gonna come back to that. Good. Yep.
Well, 1937, you still have smallpox and all sorts of other associated things like that, and yet, and so the kids of that world were seeing their classmates, their siblings be put in the ground fairly quickly, where my children don't necessarily know what that is. They don't have classmates who've died of smallpox or dysentery or whatever. There are still those people in the world, but not here. They don't see that. And so that should be at least a improvement.
Yeah. So I think, and I think maybe in the world of medicine, I think again we could say there have been great advancements, but things still happen. I don't know, 2020. Things still happen that medicine doesn't have an immediate answer for, or have an answer for. Let's go on to that second question. So how did his prediction fare over time?
Not too good.
Not too good, right? Anyone want to, I mean, you know.
George Orwell kind of countered what he said in his book 1984.
Yeah,
I mean, we're living that right now.
right, yeah. Yeah, I think what's interesting for so H.G. Wells again. I think he was born like 18. I saw the date this week, 1860s, I think. So he kind of like his career started to take off around the turn of the century, and the turn of the century, I think there was a lot of optimism about what humans could achieve. There was, just this. Just this optimism about maybe what was possible, and then World War I happened, and that kind of like shattered everything. I thought it was interesting that this comes from 1937. Maybe after World War I there was maybe some optimism. People claim, well, World War I was the war to end all wars, and so now as we make this turn, like that's behind us, and now we can focus on the great advancements in history. Of course, shortly after, about 2 years after this quote, World War II started. Yeah, comments?
Well, again, this is the rise of Japanese imperialism, Nazism. It's also the rise in this country, the intelligentsia with eugenics. And, this idea that we could purify the race if we just get rid of the mentally defectives and the morally defectives. That was the basis of Nazism. That was even our most prestigious universities in this country and foundations in the early 1900s down to the 30s were all behind eugenics.
Yep, comment?
Yeah, so, how his predictions work. So, since 1937, we went from a couple dozen countries in the world to like 200 and something. We had another war that killed like 200 million. Then we had another 100 million from communism. Then we had all of the wars in the Middle East and Africa. So
yeah,
It's also post-apocalyptic, like a atomic age, post-atomic age.
good. Yeah, the atomic bomb at 1945, right? Yeah.
It just is weirdly optimistic for where we are in time with that quote. 1937 was in Germany already rolled down. At that point, we had only less than a year left till Jews weren't even allowed to do anything in Germany. So that is just weirdly optimistic.
Depending on where you are in the world.
Let's look at that next quote underneath there, because this next quote from 1946 from a work entitled "A Mind at the End of Its Tether." The cold-blooded massacres of the defenseless, the return of deliberate and organized torture, mental torment, and fear to a world from which such things had seemed well-nigh banished, has come near to breaking my spirit altogether. Homo sapiens, as he has been pleased to call himself, is played out. 1946 was also the year that H.G. Wells passed away. So I don't know exactly when that was written, but it was the same year of his death. When we talk about the problem of sin, Tim Keller, moving on to that next quote there, it says, this is from the book, "It's hard to avoid the conclusion that there's something fundamentally wrong with the world. According to Christianity, our biggest problem is sin, yet the concept of sin is offensive or ludicrous to many. This is often because we don't understand what Christians mean by the term sin." Let me ask you, what is one of the first things that comes to mind when we talk about sin? Where do we get our idea of sin from?
Genesis.
Okay, Genesis?
Ten Commandments.
Ten Commandments, good. Yeah, I think when a lot of people think of sin, maybe we think like, there's these commands that God gave us. Don't do this, do this. All right, so when we think about sin, we think about breaking those 10 Commandments. We're going to look at how Keller defines sin and just how he opens up our mind a little bit more to what sin is, because he's going to go beyond the 10 Commandments in a way. But let me ask you that second question. Do you agree that people find the concept of sin offensive and ludicrous? Why or why not? And I'll think, right now, our present age, the people that you talk to. Yeah.
Only when you're telling them they're sinning.
Okay, only when you're telling them that they're sinful. Other thoughts? Yeah, Debbie.
Discussing with a friend of mine who is not a Christian. Has no Christian family, has no Christian friend. When we were talking, she was asking questions. She goes, she can't conceive of that she's done anything wrong, bad enough that she deserves hell.
So she can't conceive that she's done anything bad enough that she would deserve hell. Okay, good. Other thoughts? Do people find sin offensive and ludicrous? Yeah.
For some, I can imagine that sometimes it can seem ludicrous that, like, telling a small white lie can seem as bad as murdering somebody, but a sin is still a sin either way. So, but that's really hard to conceptually wrap your mind around for a lot of people.
Yeah, okay, good. And so maybe some people, they classify sin as, well, these big ticket sins. I haven't killed anybody. I haven't, committed adultery. But, those little sins, well, those aren't really sins. That's just part of, maybe, that's just part of being human or whatever. Yeah, Aaron?
From where I was from in Boston Metro, the concept that someone is sinful is offensive. And I have a Lutheran friend, he's in New York City, but what he found was actually the opposite, is that basically what's not offensive is that everyone sucks and is a sinner. What's offensive is that you can't work your way to salvation.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And in Boston Metro, what was offensive is that not everyone is getting salvation from Christ's sacrifice. So it's like everyone just deserves to get it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I think part of the problem is that in our world today, a lot of people want to think that we're mostly good people, or that there's a lot of good inside of us, and the bad comes from, I had bad parents, or people at school bullied me, or I was raised in a tough neighborhood. So I think it's really common today that people want to believe that we start with good inside of us, but the things around us is what really sours us, or it's our circumstances, it's our environment that really mess us up. Like it wasn't my fault. It was there was some other fault.
But again, basically seeing yourself as a victim.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that
You're a victim of circumstances. You're a victim of your parents.
I had so much potential, but I grew up in the wrong neighborhood. Yeah. Let's turn the page. So what is sin? This is another quote from Keller. This is picked out of a couple paragraphs. It says this: sin is the despairing refusal to find your deepest identity in your relationship and service to God. Keller equates sin with identity. He spent a lot of time in this chapter equating sin and identity. Okay, and identity. Let's hear what else he has to say. Sin is seeking to get an identity apart from Him, apart from God. Everyone gets their identity, their sense of being distinct and valuable from somewhere or something. Kierkegaard asserts that human beings were made to love God supremely and build their very identities on Him. Most people think of sin primarily as breaking divine rules. But according to the Bible, the primary way to define sin is not just the doing of bad things, but the making of good things into ultimate things. With the people next to you, why don't you go ahead and talk for a couple minutes about those questions there. Get through as many as you can. 1, 2, 3, 4. In view of that quote, answer those questions. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll give you a couple minutes.
I don't think the primary way to define sin is not good or bad things. Well, John, we're going to report.
Okay, number 2.
Of course, making them good is the ultimate.
Well, if you're sinning, you're refusing to find your deepest identity in your relationship with God. And so you're automatically finding your identity in something with God right off the bat.
So we never really actually follow that method.
Whatever you have first in your life.
But we're always there. So we never actually have, like, fulfill that commitment.
We have to say, that's like, anytime you break any of the other commandments, you don't have to break them. Okay, number 2,
Like when you start thinking about all the good things, you're like, oh, this is pretty thing. Well, this is awesome. Don't always remember to thank God for having
I mean, even when you try to do like selfless things, like going into ministry or playing in church or whatever, it can so quickly take that turn into like, that's weird. Like, oh, I'm better than everyone else because I couldn't do ministry.
I'm going to earth service.
Or you're going to earth service, or I'm so selfless.
Take about 1 more minute.
Like, those are good things for us to take so fast. For number 3, like, your identity then becomes so different because you can put your identity in your marriage. Your marriage is a part of who are you then.
All right. Let's start with number 1. Anytime we sin, what commandment do we break?
First commandment.
All of them?
I would hope to remember.
Break one, you break them all.
Okay, good. Yeah. You break one, you break them all. I was looking for it. Yeah. So the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. We shall fear, love, and trust in God above all things. I think that's really what Keller's getting at here. Maybe language that we would use is that we would say, anytime we break, if I steal something, okay, I'm breaking the 7th commandment, but I'm also, why am I stealing? Is it because I don't think God's going to provide for me? Well, then I'm breaking the first. I don't fear, love, and trust in God above all things. Okay, so I think the language that Keller's using here, we would maybe say something like, yeah, anytime we sin, we break the first commandment. I think that's what Keller's getting at. How about the second one there? Give examples of good things that turn into ultimate things. At the end of the quote up there, Keller says, breaking the 10 commandments, yes, that's sin. But so is the making of good things into ultimate things. What are some examples? Jamie?
Like putting something before God that you wouldn't think is bad, like diet or exercise.
Okay, good. And yeah, good. Okay, exercise. What else?
I think it's the phrase, the ends justify the means. I think we're too quick to accept, well, this is really a good thing, so I'm willing to accept a little bad. I'm willing to accept a little different. I'm willing to work with this thing that I know is, maybe I shouldn't. Because at the end, it's a really good thing, and we're going to do a lot of good, and we're going to partner, and we're going to serve a lot of homeless, and we're going to feed a lot of people, and we're going to partner with a lot of things, and we talk ourselves into something because we say, it's just a little sin.
Good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the idea, well, it's just a little sin. It's just, how we get there doesn't matter. Think about what's going to happen in the end. Okay, good. Yeah.
Can you explain what you mean, like, make the good things and the ultimate things? Can you just talk about that?
It's like a job.
Yeah.
It's like you put your job first.
Yeah, and so this is what I heard some more examples up here. Okay, marriage, job.
Kids.
And kids. Does anyone keep spitballing if you got them? Money, education, politics. Good. I mean, here's football. Okay, good.
National championship.
National championship. Okay. Maybe 4. Here's the thing. Anything could become an ultimate thing. Okay? I think this is especially a time of year where this happens. Where is family a good thing?
Yes.
Absolutely. Amazing blessing from God. But anything that we take as a good thing and make it the ultimate thing and put it above God, I think that's Keller's point here. So we have all these good things. Everything that you just said, I think, were good things. Work, marriage, family, exercise, football. These are all great blessings, but they can become the ultimate thing. Okay, they can become the ultimate thing. Question 3: what's so dangerous about letting the things that we just listed become our identity?
When your football team loses, you just lose hope.
We laugh.
Some people are very sad.
But move to adjourn.
Well, I think it closes you off to accepting anything else around you too. Like, your team may have lost, but like the other team is just as good, and you can't praise that other team because that would be blasphemy against your team. You can't be like, oh, good job, guys, good luck at the next championship or whatever, and hopefully you win the whole thing for that region,
That's kind of getting into number 4 too. What additional consequences can follow if we put all of our identity, and we're talking about football here, but if we put all of our identity in my team, well, when they lose, I can't have joy for anyone else. More than that, I resent those people. Now, it was rivalry weekend, so I get rivalries, okay? I get rivalries, but really from a Christian perspective, I mean, if something that we have our identity in lets us down, it's not just that we feel let down, but that often can lead to then resentment towards whatever caused that. Yeah, jump in.
On the kind of the flip side of that is that if we're children of God and we start losing our identity and we forget who we are, I mean, you're on this horrible slippery slope of giving that up. I mean, I love the story that Pastor tells where when he was growing up, his dad, he'd go out for Friday night and his dad would tell him, remember what your last name is. And that's kind of our same thing is, amid all the other worldly things, we have to remember who we are. We are children of the King of the universe.
Good.
And that changes everything.
And so that's our primary identity. Let me give you a couple more examples that'll maybe help get this. Okay, so our children. Our children are a great blessing. If we put our identity in the success of our children, what could happen?
Nothing but good.
Both of Jim's kids are here. We'll ask him next week. If Jim expects Caleb to, achieve some level, some status, some, whatever.
He can take care of him when he gets old.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe.
When Caleb lets him down, no offense, Caleb, but none of us, because at some point all of us are sinful, right? So if Jim's putting his hope in Caleb to achieve some status, Caleb might do really good things. But if he doesn't achieve this certain status, which he probably won't because he's sinful and he's limited, like all of us in this room, okay? Jim has put his hope in something that is shakeable. It's not sturdy. Yeah.
Well, it's not even in the opposite of that. Like, he does achieve all of those levels, but then that's a higher stress on him to maintain those levels. And then he resents his own father for making him maintain those levels and the stress on his life. And ultimately cuts his father out of his life because he doesn't want to have to deal with that stress.
Oh, man. Hey, have a nice flight back home. Okay, let's go easy on the Christophers. Kayla, jump in.
One of Adam's colleagues asked him a couple months ago something like, would you rather your kids grow up and be like really successful or be like really good people? And they only had like a minute to talk, so it was a brief conversation. But Adam and I talked about it when he got home and how like the most important thing to us is that our kids are followers of Jesus. And if we get that priority right, that our identity is in Christ and that we want that to be theirs too, then, hopefully when they're older, they may not be successful in the worldly sense, but if your priorities are in place, everything else, to some degree, should fall in line. You may not be wealthy, but the rest of your life should be ordered in such a way. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely.
if that's your priority, you're probably gonna be okay.
And do you want your kids, though, to have, like, you know, a career or a family? Again, great blessings, but I like what Kayla said. What's the most important thing that her kids could have?
To succeed eternally.
To succeed eternally. I like that. Yeah, it's that faith, right? It's that faith. And again, I think that's really what Keller's driving at here, is that there's these things that are great blessings. Okay, great blessings. Work is a great thing. Family is a great thing. But it's not the ultimate thing, right? It's not the ultimate thing. Good. Sarah, you want to jump in?
Well, and just to solidify that, all of the things that we think in our life are good can be taken away in a heartbeat. Literally, not just walk away, but be gone. And so
Yeah. And I think
it's not even if they walk away, they could be gone.
And I think number 3, again, what's so dangerous about letting the things that we've listed, that we've talked about, become our identity? They're all temporary. They're all shakeable. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the God of our God stands forever. Right? The word of our God stands forever. Let's keep moving on here. There's a quote there from Henrik Ibsen. Anyone heard of him? He's a somewhat famous playwright, according to Wikipedia. I stumbled across this quote, and then I learned more about Ibsen from Wikipedia. This is what he says. He says, if you take the life from an average man, if you take the life lie from an average man, you take away his happiness as well. And what he means by that, the life lie, is that we chase after these things. It says the things that stir up my desire will be the things that satisfy my desire. What Ibsen's saying is we convince ourselves that if we chase after, if we get this right thing, then that'll satisfy our desire. And so we think, well, I need more, comfort, so I need to make more money, or I want to achieve a certain status, so I need to work harder. And so we chase these things, but the lie is that these things will never actually satisfy our desire. One of the most painful moments then is when somebody chases after that life lie for, it could be years, decades, but the moment when they discover that it's a lie is the moment where I think that the door really opens to talk about Jesus or, Christianity with them. And so I think when we talk about the skeptics, I think Keller was getting at, it's that moment when somebody realizes that they've been putting their faith in all the wrong places. They've been striving after all the wrong things. And it's in that moment when they realize that it was all a lie, that they're open to the hope of Jesus. Turn to the next page. Biblical example of someone who learned this lesson the hard way. King Solomon, in the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, starting in verse 13 there, I applied my mind to study, to explore by wisdom all that's done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless. He says, look, I've increased in wisdom more than anyone. And then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. Jump down to verse 4. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Verse 8, I amassed silver and gold for myself. He says, and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem. Verse 11, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Verse 17, so I hated life, because the work that's done under the sun was grievous to me. Here's the fascinating thing about Solomon. Solomon had the means to pursue all the pleasures that this life could offer. If I wanted to see if there was true pleasure in this world, I don't think I'd be able to do so because I don't have the means to pursue it. So I could think, you know what would satisfy me? Traveling the entire world. I don't have the means to do it. You know what I might think to myself, if I could own like thousands of acres of hunting land with the greatest deer on the earth, if I could have the best deer hunting ever, that would satisfy me. I don't have the means to do that. Okay? So I think what happens for us, because we have limited means, there's these lies that exist out there that we work towards, that we think would be, well, I'm just a poor soul. I mean, if I was rich, then I could have this great hunting land, but that's not my lot. So I'm just, forever poor. But Solomon had the means to pursue all this. He had the wealth, he had the power, he had the influence. So he said, parks and vineyards, great. I planted parks, big houses. I built big houses. Cheering myself with good wine. He tried the great wine. Sex, he says, a harem. I had a harem. Solomon's known for his, hundreds, maybe thousands of wives. Why? He was the king. He was powerful. He had all the means to try everything that this world had to offer. So everything that we think could bring us pleasure, Solomon had the means to actually go after it. And verse 17, so I hated life. The richest, most powerful, smartest, all these pleasures, all these things. And what does he say? I hated life. I hated life. Of course, the repeated word in Ecclesiastes, meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. Let's go to the back page. So what hope is there? Keller says, at some point in most lives, we're confronted with the fact that we are not the persons we know we should be. Almost always our response is to turn over a new leaf and try harder to live according to our principles. That ultimately will only lead us into a spiritual dead end. When we believe these lies, that if I'm more successful, if I make more money, if this, if that, when we believe those lies, when we come up short, what's the answer? And I think for a lot of people, the answer is try harder, or it leads to dark places. How am I going to cope with this? Or if you want to play it all the way out, it can drive people to pure despair. Number one there, evaluate this statement. Losing the lie is a better place to be than believing the lie.
I think it's true.
You think it is true?
I do.
Yeah.
Because the sin, in a lot of this, everything that we've read leads to the thought that we are actually in control of any of this stuff. That's putting ourselves above God. That's, that is just a really huge sin. And so if we run along that path for long enough, and then we wake up, then we realize, that was not really within my control. There are things that are, but it's only through God and what His will is for us.
Good. Yeah, I think control plays a big part in this. That the quote on the top of the page there. The answer is, well, turn over a new leaf, try harder. It's on me. If I haven't achieved what I wanted to achieve, well, it's on me. I got to try harder. I got to do something to make it better. Good. Other thoughts? Losing the lie is a better place to be than believing the lie. Jim.
Well, if you never buy into the lie, you don't either believe it nor lose it.
Okay, good.
Right, so if you believe and trust in the truth, which is God, then...
Good, and I think that's really as Christians, that's where we want to be, right? We don't ever want to believe in the lie in the first place. Absolutely. Others? Yeah.
I think for a person who is secular and doesn't believe in God at all, losing the lie can sometimes be very dangerous for them because it can lead to a very dark place that even if you as a friend try to reach out to them, they just absolutely reject anything at all, and then they're just gone.
Maybe I should have clarified too. This question, I think, again, this chapter kind of tugs us in two directions. But if we really have the skeptic in mind here, if we really have the skeptic in mind, do you think it's better for the skeptic to lose the lie or to believe the lie? And I think if I'm hearing you, Jamie, you're saying it's better that when they believe the lie, because when they lose the lie, it's a dangerous place.
I think it depends on the skeptic. Because some skeptics, when they lose the lie, they will be more open to hearing from you about your faith and actually listening to you. But for others, it might be more dangerous for them to lose it because they have no identity outside of that. And so it's better for you if you have a friend like that and you know them, it's better for you to try and reach them while they still believe in the lie and introduce that, hey, there's this other thing there. Start eating away at it.
Caleb?
Well, I'm just going to say maybe the danger is unavoidable. You know, if someone has really bought so deeply into it that despite your efforts to, teach them about Jesus, it's unsuccessful, then maybe the danger is unavoidable. But that is, you do see so often when people reach rock bottom, then they say, okay, there's got to be a better solution than me,
I was reading something this past week, and it was I think it was a pastor, maybe he was a professor, anyways, wrote that he said the greatest pity is when someone still believes the lie. And I think the reason that's true is because if they believe the lie, if they believe if I can get one more promotion, or if I can, make a little more money, or if I can, if my kids can just achieve this, when they still believe it, then that is where their identity still lies. Yeah, jump in.
If we are searching for peace, are we searching for peace of what God can provide, or are we searching for God himself? Do we risk going, God can give you peace, so they're actually searching for the peace, not for God?
I think it's actually both, because I think what happens is when someone loses the lie, when they realize I've been striving after this my entire life and I keep coming up empty, they are looking for peace. But as Christians, we know the only place where they can find true peace, stable peace, rock solid, eternal peace is in God. Does that make sense? Right? And I think that's where Keller has kind of drove in this chapter, is that so when this person is finally realizes I need peace, I need some kind of hope, but I've tried all these other things and it hasn't worked. Well, maybe that's the opening then for this skeptic to say, well, how about this eternal, unchanging, all-powerful God who loved us so much that his son was born in a manger for us. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the whole point of Solomon. He had everything. And when he had everything, he realized it didn't satisfy him. And, like you said, the person who thinks if I get that job, if I have that amount of wealth, if I marry that person, if I live in that neighborhood, The tragedy is when they get that, and like Solomon says, it's all meaningless.
It's still meaningless. And that's where I would say losing the lie is a better place to be. That second question there, the doctrine of sin brings comfort to this person. How is the doctrine of sin a comfort? I was nervous to put this question on here.
Okay, I can see if I can go the right way here. So, as Christians, and in this world where there's so much that's not going well, or, all this awful stuff, as Christians, we might say to someone, well, that's because we live in a sinful world, right? But it's like, it's not that we accept the sin or that we enjoy seeing these things happen, but it's just as a Christian, we expect it. So
Good,
it doesn't
okay.
surprise us.
Good.
It saddens us, but it doesn't surprise us.
Good. Yeah, I think for this type of person that's trying to find comfort, security, peace in all these other places, and thinking that they can achieve it. And if they don't achieve it, it's something wrong with them. It's something wrong with them. Like, well, I need to work harder, or maybe I'm just not smart enough, or maybe I'm just not likable. People don't like me, so I can't achieve any of this. Imagine telling them, like, you know what? We're actually all sinful. If you look in here, you're always going to come up short. Now, that's not a comfort in itself, but maybe for the first time in their lives, they take their eyes off of themselves and say, you mean there's nothing that I can do? And then maybe their eyes go outward. So to say that the doctrine of sin is a comfort, I don't know, I feel like Pastor's probably cringing back there.
Just taking notes.
But the point is that maybe for this person who's looking in here to satisfy themselves, maybe for the first time they're going to say, you mean that I'm never going to be able to do anything to give myself security? All of a sudden they could be very open to hearing about this man who lived and who lives in heaven, who did everything perfectly in their place and who took all their shortcomings to the cross. Yeah.
But sometimes they're still stuck with that illusion. They come to church, they say the prayer, they sing the songs, they listen to the pastor, they shake his hand, they come to the Bible study, and they don't feel better. They pray, and they don't get the blessings that their ATM God, that they think they deserve. And I'm not saying God's an ATM, I'm saying their ATM God hasn't been dishing out. And then they start to have the excuse, well, I'm having a bad day, the car's not working as well, I'm exhausted because I worked all weekend, so I won't go to church, and we've all had those bad days. None of us in this room have had a perfect time. We have all had struggles. And Absolutely. It's always easy on a Sunday morning. There's always an excuse to go, I'm too tired to go to church. And for me, Absolutely. When I'm too tired to go to church, there's a passage that I think about from Acts somewhere where it says that as was his custom, Paul went to the synagogue. And if I do nothing right in my life, I pray that on my tombstone, my kids can say, as was his custom, he went to church. If that's it, that's the only thing they ever see. Because coming to church doesn't solve my issues. Coming to church will not make my life better. Coming to church will not fix my job or my mortgage or my car or whatever, because it's not the building that fixes it, it's not the people, it's not the pastor. I don't put my faith in any of y'all. But this is where it comes from. And those kind of people that sometimes they try to replace one lie with another. And I hope they don't, but they do see that illusion.
Yeah, Pastor.
I think something for us to remember, of course, is that for people that don't have faith in Jesus, they have to exchange one lie for another. Because they have to find their identity someplace. And that's the whole point, I think, this chapter is that you might have an opportunity through the work of the Holy Spirit to provide them an identity that they didn't know about before. But of course, if their job turns out to not be what they wanted it to be, they have no choice except to exchange one life for another because they don't know the true identity that you have as children of your Heavenly Father. And I think that's something to keep in mind too as you come out of here today. We kind of applied a bunch of this stuff to ourselves, which is good. But there's ultimately, as children of our Heavenly Father, there's nothing there's no good that we've placed higher than Him. That you've not exchanged the truth of God for a lie. It's a binary choice. Either you're children of God or you're not. And I think what the really neat opportunity with the doctrine of sin that I've found over the years is that people that I know that don't believe in Jesus do recognize that life is broken. Whether it's broken in their personal life or it's just broken all around them, they understand brokenness. And that's what we have an opportunity to address. A God who fixes broken things. A God who doesn't just say, try to get your life together, but a God who climbed down into the brokenness with us. And that, I think, is something that resonates with people who are struggling in a broken world. That we don't have a God who reigns above a broken world, but a God who became part of it. Yeah, and so I think the incarnation there is one of the most wonderful opportunities to share the gospel with people who can sense brokenness around.
And I think that's the answer to the last question there. I had one more H.G. Wells quote. There's no creed, no way of living left in the world at all that really meets the needs of the time. And I wanted to finish with how would we respond? I think what Pastor just said is a great response to that. Thank you, everybody. Next week we're going to look at religion and the gospel.
Thanks, Vicar.
Come up here, Wayne.
Just told me I'll turn around, thanks. You gotta behave.
So at our house. Yeah,